Welcome to NCRT Chapter 3 Reading Part 2. If you haven't gone through first part, go through it.
3.3 Gametogenesis. The primary sex organs, the testes in the males and the ovaries in the females, produce gametes, that is sperm and ovum respectively, by the process called gametogenesis. In testes, the immature male germ cells, also known as spermatogonia, produce sperms by spermatogenesis that begins at puberty. The spermatogonia, singular spermatogonium, present on the inside wall of seminiferous tubules, multiply by mitotic division and increase in numbers. Each spermatogonia is diploid and contains 46 chromosomes. Some of the spermatogonia, called primary spermatocytes, periodically undergoes meiosis. A primary spermatocyte completes the first meiotic division, also known as reduction division, leading to formation of two equal haploid cells called secondary spermatocytes, which have only 23 chromosomes each. The secondary spermatocytes undergo the second meiotic division to produce four equal haploid spermatids. What would be the number of chromosomes in the spermatids? Obviously, it will be haploid. The spermatids are transformed into spermatozoa, also known as sperms, by the process called spermiogenesis. After spermiogenesis, sperm heads became embedded in the Sertoli cells and are finally released from the seminiferous tubules by the process called spermiation. Spermatogenesis starts at the age of puberty due to significant increase in the secretion of gonadotropin releasing hormone GnRH. This, if you recall, is a hypothalamic hormone. The increased level of GnRH then acts at the anterior pituitary gland and stimulates secretion of two gonadotropins, that is luteinizing hormone LH and follicle stimulating hormone FSH. LH acts at the Leydig cells and stimulates synthesis and secretion of androgens. Androgens in turn stimulate the process of spermatogenesis. FSH acts on the Sertoli cells and stimulates secretion of some factors which help in the process of spermiogenesis. Let us examine the structure of a sperm. It is a microscopic structure composed of a head, neck, a middle piece and a tail. A plasma membrane envelopes the whole body of sperm. The sperm head contains a elongated haploid nucleus, the anterior portion of which is covered by a cap-like structure, acrosome. The acrosome is filled with enzymes that help fertilization of the ovum. The middle piece possesses numerous mitochondria which produce energy for the movement of tail that facilitates sperm motility essential for fertilization. The human male ejaculates about 200 to 300 million sperms during a coitus, of which for a normal fertility. At least 60% sperms must have normal shape and size, and at least 40% of them must show vigorous motility. Sperms released from the seminiferous tubules are transported by the accessory ducts. Secretion of epididymis, vas deferens, seminal vesicle and prostate are essential for maturation and motility of sperms. The seminal plasma along with the sperm constitute the semen. The functions of male sex accessory ducts and glands are maintained by the testicular hormones androgens. The process of formation of a mature female gamete is called oogenesis, which is markedly different from spermatogenesis. Oogenesis is initiated during the embryonic development stage when a couple of million gamete mother cells, also known as oogonia, are formed within each fetal ovary. No more oogonia are formed and added after birth. These cells start division and enter into prophase 1 of the meiotic division and get temporarily arrested at that stage, called primary oocyte. Each primary oocyte then gets surrounded by a layer of granulosa cells and it is called the primary follicle. A large number of these follicles degenerate during the phase from birth to puberty. Therefore, At puberty, only 60,000 to 80,000 primary follicles are left in each ovary. The primary follicles get surrounded by more layers of granulosa cells and a new theca and are called secondary follicles. The secondary follicle soon transfer into a tertiary follicle, which is characterized by a fluid-filled cavity called antrum. The theca layer is organized into an inner theca interna and an outer theca externa. It is important to draw your attention that it is at this stage that the primary oocyte within the tertiary follicle grows in size and completes its first meiotic division. It is an unequal division resulting in the formation of a large haploid secondary oocyte and a tiny first polar body. The secondary oocyte retains bulk of the nutrient-rich cytoplasm of the primary oocyte. Can you think of any advantage for this? Does the first polar body born out of first meiotic division divide further or degenerate? At present, we are not very certain about this. The tertiary follicle further changes into the mature follicle or Graafian follicle. The secondary oocyte forms a new membrane called zona pellucida surrounding it. The Graafian follicle now ruptures to release the secondary oocyte, also known as ovum, from the ovary by the process called ovulation. Can you identify major differences between spermatogenesis and oogenesis? A diagrammatic representation of spermatogenesis and oogenesis is given below. Now, 3.4 Menstrual cycle. The reproductive cycle in the female primates, example monkeys, apes and human beings, is called menstrual cycle. The first menstruation begins at puberty and it is called menarche. The human female's menstruation is repeated at an average interval of about 28 or 29 days. And the cycle of events starting from one menstruation till the next one is called the menstrual cycle. One ovum is released during the middle of each menstrual cycle. The major events of the menstrual cycle are shown in figure 3.9. The cycle starts with the menstrual phase when menstrual flow occurs and it lasts for 3 to 5 days. The menstrual flow results due to breakdown of endometrial lining of the uterus and its blood vessel which forms liquid that comes out through vagina. Menstruation only occurs if the released ovum is not fertilized. Lack of menstruation may be indicative of pregnancy. However, it may also be caused due to some other underlying causes like stress, poor health, etc. The menstrual phase is followed by the follicular phase. During this phase, the primary follicles in the ovary grow to become a fully mature Graafian follicle and simultaneously the endometrium of uterus regenerates through proliferation. These changes in the ovary and the uterus are induced by changes in the levels of pituitary and ovarian hormones. The secretion of gonadotropin, LH and FSH increases gradually during the follicular phase and stimulates follicular development as well as secretion of estrogen by the growing follicles. Both LH and FSH attain a peak level in the middle of cycle about 14th day. Rapid secretion of LH leading to its maximum level during the mid-cycle called LH surge induces rupture of Graafian follicle and thereby the release of ovum, also known as ovulation. The ovulation, also known as ovulatory phase, is followed by the luteal phase, during which the remaining parts of the Graafian follicle transform as the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum secretes large amounts of progesterone which is essential for maintenance of its endometrium. Such an endometrium is necessary for implantation of the fertilized ovum and other events of pregnancy. During pregnancy, all events of the menstrual cycle stop and there is no menstruation. In the absence of fertilization, the corpus luteum degenerates. This causes disintegration of the endometrium leading to menstruation, marking a new cycle. In human beings, menstrual cycle ceases around 50 years of age. that is termed as menopause. Cyclic menstruation is an indicator of normal reproductive phase and extends between menarche and menopause. Now 3.5, fertilization and implantation. During copulation, also known as coitus, semen is released by the penis into the vagina. This process is also known as insemination. The motile sperm swims rapidly, pass through the cervix, enter into the uterus, and finally reach the ampullary region of the fallopian tube. The ovum released by the ovary is also transported to the ampullary region where fertilization takes place. Fertilization can only occur if the ovum and sperms are transported simultaneously to the ampullary region. This is the reason why not all copulations lead to fertilization and pregnancy. The process of fusion of a sperm with an ovum is called fertilization. During fertilization, a sperm comes in contact with the zona pellucida layer of the ovum and induces changes in the membrane that block the entry of additional sperms. Thus, it ensures that only one sperm can fertilize an ovum. The secretion of the acrosome helps the sperm enter into the cytoplasm of the ovum through the zona pellucida and the plasma membrane. This induces the completion of the meiotic division of the secondary oocyte. The second meiotic division is also unequal and results in the formation of a second polar body and a haploid ovum, also known as oocyte. Soon, the haploid nucleus of the sperm and that of the ovum fuse together to form a diploid zygote. How many chromosomes will be there in the zygote? One has to remember that the sex of the baby has been decided at this stage itself. Let us see how. As you know, the chromosome pattern in the human male is XX and that in the male is XY. Therefore, all the haploid gametes produced by the female have the 6 chromosome X, whereas in the male gametes, the 6 chromosome could be either X or Y. Hence, 50% of sperm carry the X chromosome while the other 50% carry the Y. After fusion of the male and female gametes, the zygote would carry either XX or XY, depending on whether the sperm carrying X or Y fertilize the ovum. The zygote carrying XX would develop into a female baby and XY would form a male. That is why scientifically it is correct to say that the sex of the baby is determined by the father and not by the mother. The meiotic division starts at the zygote, moves through the isthmus of the oviduct called cleavage towards the uterus and forms 2, 4, 8, 16 daughter cells called blastomeres. The embryo with 8 to 16 blastomere is called a morula. The morula continues to divide and transforms into blastocyst as it moves further into the uterus. The blastomeres in the blastocyst are arranged into an outer layer called tropoblast and an inner group of cells attached to the tropoblast called the inner cell mass. The tropoblast layer then gets attached to the endometrium and the inner cell mass get differentiated as the embryo. After attachment, the uterine cell divides rapidly and covers the blastocyst. As a result, the blastocyst becomes embedded in the endometrium of the uterus. This is called implantation and it leads to pregnancy. 3.6, Pregnancy and embryonic development. After implantation, finger-like projection appear on the tropoblast called chorionic villi, which are surrounded by the uterine tissue and maternal blood. The chorionic villi and uterine tissue become interdigitate with each other and jointly form a structural and functional unit between developing embryo and maternal body called placenta. The placenta facilitates the supply of oxygen and nutrients to the embryo and also removal of carbon dioxide and excretory waste materials produced by the embryo. The placenta is connected to the embryo through an umbilical cord which helps in the transport of substances to and from the embryo. Placenta also acts as an endocrine tissue and produces several hormones like human chorionic gonadotropin HCG, human placental lactogen, HPL, estrogen, progesterone, etc. In the latter phase of pregnancy, a hormone called relaxin is also secreted by the ovary. Let us remember that HCG, HPL and relaxin are produced in women only during pregnancy. It is important, HCG, HPL and relaxin are produced in women only during pregnancy. In addition, during pregnancy, the level of other hormones like estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, prolactin, thyroxine, etc. are increased several folds in the maternal blood. Increased production of this hormone is essential for supporting the fetal growth, metabolic changes in the mother, and maintenance of pregnancy. Immediately after implantation, the inner mast cells differentiates into an outer layer called ectoderm and an inner layer called endoderm. The mesoderm soon appears between the ectoderm and the endoderm. These three layers give rise to all the tissues or organs in adults. It needs to be mentioned here that the inner cell mass contains certain cells called stem cells which have the potency to give rise to all the tissues and organs. What are the major features of embryonic development at various months of pregnancy? The human pregnancy lasts 9 months. Do you know for how many months pregnancy lasts in dogs, elephants, cats? Find out. In human beings, after 1 month of pregnancy, the embryo's heart is formed. The first sign of growing fetus may be noticed by listening to the heart sound carefully through the stethoscope. By the end of the second month of pregnancy, the fetus develops limbs and digits. By the end of 12 weeks or first trimester, most of the major organ systems are formed. For example, the limbs and external genital organs are well developed. The first movements of the fetus and appearance of hair on the head are usually observed during the 5th month. By the end of about 24 weeks or end of second trimester, the body is covered with fine hair, eyelids separate, and eyelashes are formed. By the end of 9 months of pregnancy, the fetus is fully developed and is ready for delivery. 3.7 Parturition and lactation. The average duration of human pregnancy is about 9 months, which is called the gestation period. Vigorous contraction of the uterus at the end of pregnancy causes expulsion or delivery of the fetus. This process of delivery of the fetus is called parturition. Parturition is induced by a complex neuroendocrine mechanism. The signals for parturition originate from the fully developed fetus and the placenta, which induce mild uterine contractions called fetal ejection reflex. This triggers release of oxytocin from the maternal pituitary. Oxytocin acts on the uterine muscle and causes stronger uterine contraction, which in turn stimulates further secretion of oxytocin. The stimulatory reflex between the uterine contraction and the oxytocin secretion continues, resulting in stronger and stronger contractions. This leads to expulsion of the baby out of the uterus through the birth canal, that is known as parturition. Soon after the infant is delivered, the placenta is also expelled out of the uterus. What do you think the doctors inject to induce delivery? The mammary glands of the female undergo differentiation during pregnancy and start producing milk towards the end of pregnancy by the process called lactation. This helps the mother in feeding the newborn. The milk produced during the initial few days of lactation is called colostrum. The milk produced during the initial few days of lactation is called colostrum. The milk produced during the initial few days of lactation is called colostrum, which contains several antibodies absolutely essential to develop resistance for the newborn babies. Breastfeeding during the initial period of infant growth is recommended by doctors for bringing up a healthy baby. So we have completed this chapter, human reproduction. Thank you, and please subscribe the channel.